Hi everyone, good afternoon, how are you? I'm sorry if you can hear outside noises as demonstrated by that motorbike. That won't happen, that was a fluke, it just wanted to test me. I'm sorry if you can hear some outside noises. It is so hot today, I cannot close the windows. As much as I love you, and I do, I'm not gonna close the windows. Anyway, there will be no more motorbikes like that, touch wood. I thought that I would record a reading vlog today. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I want to do a reading vlog for the next 24 hours. This is not a like readathon, read as much as you can, stay up all night kind of video, but all the plans that I have for the next 24 hours are reading and baking, and I would like to film both of those things. So I have these 5 books here which I would like to make my way through. I won't finish them all, but I plan to at least start them all, and I want to talk to you about them at various intervals over the next 24 hours. And as I was painting my nails, all of these different colours, I had an idea. One of my favourite puddings is, oh, that's a bit wonky. One of my favourite puddings is Pavlova, which is, and also Eton Mess, which is kind of the same thing. Eton Mess is like a deconstructed Pavlova. So it's meringue and then whipped cream and fruit. And I have made a lot of lemon meringue pies over the course of lockdown, which I've enjoyed doing. So now I'm quite confident at making meringue to go on top of that pie. And I thought, well, why don't I make a Pavlova? I'm not gonna look at a recipe. I mean, I probably should look at a recipe, but I feel like I can do it without a recipe. I want to kind of have a bit of an experiment. So I would like to make a Pavlova, but not just a Pavlova that is flat and has whipped cream on it. What I would like to do is make a rainbow Pavlova. So as you saw, I used 4 different colors on my nails. So I would like to use 4 different colors in this Pavlova. I think that would be really fun. So I want to do a plain base, and then I want to do some, I think they're called meringue kisses, aren't they? Which are the tiny little meringues. So I'll talk to you about the little meringues in a bit, because I have to make the big meringue first. I've just turned you around slightly so I can talk to you better, and also so that you see less of Mr. M's rather messy wardrobe, which is not aesthetically pleasing. So as I said, I want to make the big meringue to go on the bottom of the Pavlova first. And as a general rule, my understanding, having made lemon meringue pie before, is that for every 1 egg that you use, you want to use 50 grams of sugar and half a tablespoon of corn flour. You only use the egg whites from the egg. You can keep the yolks for another recipe. So for the big meringue on the bottom, I'm going to use 3 egg whites. And you want to make sure that the glass bowl that you use before you whip up the egg whites is really clean. Obviously you want it to be clean anyway, but I specifically mean you don't want any eggshell fragments in, because that will encourage the egg whites to not rise properly, and that's just depressing. It's not what we want. We want them to be big and fluffy. If you want to make vegan meringue, you can use the water from chickpeas, which is very cool, which I need to try at some point, but today I'm going to be using egg. So you want to whip up the egg whites, and then once you've got stiff looking peaks and it's starting to look a bit shiny, you want to add in very gradually 1 tablespoon at a time. As you're whisking, multitasking, you want to add in half of the sugar that you're using, and then you want to add in the corn flour, and then you want to add in the other half of the sugar. Very, very slowly, continually mixing till it's all mixed in, and then I'm going to put it on a baking tray, and then I'm going to bake it, I think for about an hour, maybe just over an hour on 100 degrees Celsius, and I have a fan oven. I'm going to put it on a baking sheet. So that is the plan, and then we can move on to the meringue kisses. But let me talk to you about the first book that I am reading. I'm not going to hold them all up now and talk to you about them, because I'm going to be talking to you about them in turn as we go. And I don't want to repeat myself or waste your time. So the first book that I'm reading is Outsiders. Now, this is a book that I am probably going to be biased about, because I have a story in it myself, but I am very excited to read this anthology. All of the authors in here have taken the idea of outsiders and have translated it in different ways. So some of these stories are from the point view of people who feel like they're outside certain situations. Some of these are about people observing outsiders. So I've already read the first 2 stories in here, which are by Julia Armfield, who wrote Saltstone. She wrote the first story in here. I've read her short story collection before, and this one is has hints of Beowulf in it, and it's about these 2 giants who are kind of on the run, but it's set in the modern day. And then the next one is called Francine, and it's by Anna Wood, and it made me feel so uncomfortable in the best way. She's deliberately making you feel uncomfortable. It's set at a music festival, assuming it's supposed to be Glastonbury, though I don't think it names it, and it's about a group of friends who go there every year, and they find this girl who's camped next to them called Francine, but she doesn't dance in the way that they like, and she doesn't seem to have any other friends there. And she's giving me Luna Lovegood vibes. She's just up to her own thing, and she's keeping herself to herself. And they're at first intrigued by this, but then they almost take offense because they think that because they don't understand her, she must think that she's better than them. And it turns into this really cliquey behavior, and it's just not very nice, but also, as I said, in the best way possible. It's a brilliant story. So I'm going to continue reading the rest of the stories in this collection and update you on my thoughts as I go. But first, let's go and make the base meringue. Hi again. One of the fabulous things about reading an anthology, either of short stories or of poetry, is that hopefully you're going to stumble across someone's work that you have never read before, someone who is new to you, or perhaps even new in general. There's someone in here, there may be more than one person here, but so far I found one person in this anthology who is published for the first time inside this book, and I can't get my head around this being their first ever published story because it's incredible. We'll get to that in a second. But that's one of the fabulous things about reading anthologies, is that you're going to discover new people. I've just read a short story in here by Leonie Ross, and I have never read any of her books before. I know that she's got a couple of novels, but I'm keen to read her short story collection, which is called, let's see, in her biography at the back, it's called Come Let Us Sing Anyway, which was published 3 years ago, and then she's got another novel coming out with Faber and Faber next year. So Peephole is about a man who's having an affair, and it's the first time with this person that he's having an affair with where they have said, you can stay, you know, have a lazy morning, get up whenever you want and let yourself out. So he finds himself in the home of someone who he knows, but he only knows a very small part of, and obviously the temptation is to snoop around, and it has, that's not the pinnacle point of the story, but that's where we start off with, and I won't spoil the rest for you. But listen to this sentence from the second paragraph. It says, "It's he who comes to bestow favours when she calls for him like flesh takeaway." I love that line. The next story in the collection is by Kirsty Logan called Found Girls. You know that I love her work. And then the one after that is the one I was referring to before, where I said that someone's first ever published story is in this book. And it is outrageous that this is their first published story. It's called Skin. It's by Lena Mohammed. And it's about this incredible world where, well, the world is not incredible. I don't want to be in it, but the way she has described it is incredible. It feels so visceral and real. It's a world where people come out of their skins every night, literally, not in a metaphorical sense, and they put their skins to soak, to moisturize, and people steal other people's skins because youthful skins are very much in demand, white skins are very much in demand, and our narrator has her skin stolen, and she finds a clique of people who have also had their skin stolen, or who have chosen to walk around without their skins at all, and they have to cover their bodies in gauze. Mariah's skin began to pucker and pale, making a sound like rustling leaves when she rubbed her fingers across it. It's just amazing. And the story after that is my own, which is called Miss Juniper's Academy for Wild Girls. I obviously will not review that one, but I will talk you through. I will read you the first couple of paragraphs to give you a bit of a taster, and I will list all of the books I'm going to be talking about today in the description box if you would like to go and find out more about them. So my story begins. Miss Juniper clapped her hands for quiet. Girls, it is almost time for our Christmas dance. Everyone quivered. It was the season of spice foods, dried flowers, and soft slippers. Many of the girls wrote home for treats, for food, for dresses, for gloves. Those who received replies were sent treasures in boxes of cherry wood, hurried in through the oak doors to stop the snow scurrying in behind. Even so, Sister Elizabeth often complained that the hallway was covered in sludge. "You will turn our home into an ice rink," she snapped, slipping on the tiles, and far from having the desired effect of stopping us traipsing rain-soaked through the hall, Abigail tried to work out just how much water we would need and at what temperature to turn the whole downstairs into an ice palace. The classrooms were cold during the day. They said it was good for us, but I didn't believe it. As we decorated the walls for winter, Miriam told Miss Juniper that we should invest in lamps made of soapstone, and that instead of burning oil in the evenings, we should burn seal fat, like those who lived in the Arctic. "My father knows all about it," she boasted. "He's travelled as far north as you can go. At home, we've a narwhal tusk on our mantelpiece. Pa even bested a polar bear in a game of whist." "Bears don't play cards," snorted Abigail. Miriam stuck out her chin defiantly. "And how would you know? You've gone no further north than Scotland." Abigail scowled, stabbing cloves into the belly of a tangerine. Outside, our world turned blue. I will leave it there. So, let's get back to the meringue, shall we? Books and meringues. What an excellent day. So the big meringue I've put in the oven on 100 degrees for about an hour. And for the meringue kisses, I think I'm going to use 2 eggs, and I'll make the meringue in the same way as I made the big one, but then I'm going to divide it into 4 and do 4 different colours, because I thought if I use a piping bag and I have food colouring from when I made that biscuit video, I will link that video in the description if you would like to go and watch me turn biscuits into my favourite book covers with some success. It was more successful the second time I did it, when I made a batch of biscuits for Lena's birthday. I will link that video in the description box down below as well. But I have food colouring, and I thought if I put stripes down the inside of a piping bag and then put the meringue inside it and pipe it, that should make striped meringues. So I'm going to make little meringue kisses, and then I'm going to somehow assemble it, and I'm going to put the meringue kisses, I think, in the oven for about half an hour, because they won't need as much time as the big one, but on the same temperature. Yeah, okay. Let's try that and see if we can make some kind of rainbow pavlova. Cool. I always do this. I always think it's out of focus and then remember it's just because I don't have my glasses on. Hello, it's the next morning. I'm not sure why I'm wearing a pink bra, but you know, choices. Making the meringue yesterday was really fun. You will have noticed probably that I definitely got better at making the meringue kisses after the first 2 batches. There is a certain technique to it. So some of the earlier ones were wonky, but I like to think it added character to the whole thing. Last night I finished reading Outsiders. It's fantastic. You should buy it. Like the rest of the stories in the collection, I loved. I wanted to read you a couple of lines. Actually, let me put foundation on and then I can put my glasses on and then I can read them to you. It is looking a bit overcast today as well, and I'm hoping that that means it's going to rain later. I don't want to be like over dramatic, but I don't think I've ever been more excited about anything in my life. Okay, so the lines that I wanted to read to you. There's a story in here by Emma Hutton about a really creepy man who meets his match in a woman who runs a florist. And it is so sinister, but also hilarious. And she's talking about perfume. It says, maybe he does smell a bit weird, but so what? Everyone smells weird now. It's all wet concrete, a rose in Chernobyl, trapped sunlight in an undiscovered monk's cave. The last perfume I bought, the woman at the counter described it as, imagine you've escaped from the witch's oven in Hansel and Gretel. You are running. You are finally free. Honestly, laughed a lot at that. There's a story in here by Sarvat Hassin, which is about a racist haunted house, which was just incredible. And I love these lines in Susan James' story, which is called But Not Like That. The heavens are a low white ceiling, so pregnant with winter that I can almost reach up and touch them. I would so recommend this book. As I said, slightly biased because I have a story in it, but I'm recommending it for all of the other stories that are in there, and it is a pleasure to be part of such a fantastic collection. After I finished reading Outsiders last night, I started 2 books from my Women in Translation Month TBR. I made a whole video on books by women in translation, which I'll link in the description box down below if you would like to go and check that out. But I started reading People in My Neighbourhood by Hiromi Kawakami, and it's a series of flash fiction. I think I'm going to finish that today, so I'll speak about that later on in this video. And then I also read this picture book, which is super cute. This is called The Invisible Bear by Cecile Metzger, and it's translated from French. I don't know if she translated it herself. I have a feeling she must have done because the translator is not listed anywhere inside this book, but the English editor is listed. So I think she must have translated it. I will insert some cutaways here so that you can see the illustration. I pre-ordered this because I follow her on Instagram and I love her illustration style. This is about a polar bear who feels very lonely and sad. In an Eeyore kind of way, a cloud follows him around all the time. And then a woman moves in next door to him, and she's very loud and colourful, and she has lots of plants, and he doesn't really like how loud she is, but then she needs water to water her plants, and he thinks, well, maybe I can use the rainwater that's constantly falling on me to water her plants. And there's this beautiful page where it's showing him filling up with water. It's very complex for children to understand. I would almost say this is a picture book I would recommend more to adults than children. I'm not 100% sold on the transitions between the spreads because they are windows into much larger topics that require extra context, which is fine for adults, but not so much for children. It relies on you having that grown up who can offer that support and open those conversations, which I hope will be there. But obviously it won't be there for all children, which is sad. So with extra added conversations for children, this is wonderful. And for adults on its own, as a way to muse on large topics and admire her illustration work, it's fantastic. Today, I'm going to continue reading and I am going to be doing a bit more baking. I want to make some bread buns to use for sandwiches throughout the rest of the week. And also I'm planning on making katsu curry later in the week. So I'm hoping that I can use some of the leftover buns to make breadcrumbs as well. I've never actually made breadcrumbs from scratch before. I always just buy them in packets, but that seems a bit ridiculous given that I'm making so much bread at the moment. So I'm hoping I can play around with that a bit. I won't talk you through the recipes for the bread buns that I'm making today because I am using someone else's recipe, so I'll link that in the description box down below. But speaking of baking and creating things, this video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. As you know, I have worked with Skillshare for the past 3 or 4 years now, and I think that they are wonderful. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes on so many different topics. When I've worked with them before, I've talked to you about their classes on calligraphy, on baking and cooking, on how to look after houseplants. When we moved, Emily's video on the decorating your home and thinking about space was really informative. They have classes on essay writing and how to get started with writing as well, which I've also spoken about before. They are just an amazing resource, especially in times like these. As I mentioned in a previous video that I did with them, and this is not something that they've mentioned to me, it's just something that I think would be quite fun. I think it would be really fun if you and your friend, or you and a family member who can't see each other at the moment, sign up for the same classes and take them together. You don't have to take them at a specific time because they're just available online and they're broken down into very small segments. They're easy to take whenever you happen to have the time, but you could take the classes together and then share your work and talk about them, or you can take them on your own. Skillshare have given me a link for you, which is right at the top of the description box down below. The first 1,000 people to click on that link will get 2 months free of Skillshare. After that, Skillshare is a really affordable platform, and premium membership works out at less than $10 a month. I honestly recommend it so much, and as I said, especially at the moment when I know that I am looking for creative things to do to distract my brain and make me feel calmer. It's a wonderful resource for things like that, so do go and check it out, and thanks so much to them for sponsoring this video. Okay, so let's start making the bread buns. I will put the mixture together and leave it to prove, and then while it's proving, I'll read some more and come back to you and talk to you about the books that I'm reading. You are perched quite precariously on a pile of books, so stay still, don't fall. I've just finished reading this, which is People from My Neighbourhood by Hiromi Koakami, which is translated from the Japanese by Ted Goosen. I loved this book and I'm so relieved. It's called palm of the hand fiction. That's what it's called in Japan, which is flash fiction here, or microfiction. And there was a period where I read quite a bit of flash fiction and wrote quite a bit of flash fiction as well. But I think when I gravitate towards writing really short, more narrative-driven pieces now, I tend to write prose poetry. They are cousins, they share similar themes, but they are different. I've made a video on this. I will link it in the description box down below. I think I went through a period of whenever I picked up collections of really short flash fiction, I just didn't gel with it. The writer has to really grab your attention very quickly. Flash fiction is normally about 500 words. So the plus points to that is that you can play with really wild, outrageous ideas because the reader doesn't have to believe you for a very long period of time. The downside of that is that there is no time really to connect with, well, there's not no time to connect with characters, but there is a limited time to connect. And if you read a lot of flash fiction in one go, it can just feel as though everything blends into everything else. So the stories really need to have a very distinctive voice, plot, characters, etc. It's a fantastic space to play with magical realism in particular, and I think I just haven't picked it up recently because I read some collections that I just really didn't gel with and I kind of moved away from it. But this is brilliant. So there is a story with a grandfather who has two shadows. There is a story where a young girl is dissecting doll brains. There is a story where, I was going to say a bit too close to home, but it's very short so it doesn't matter. There is an illness going around called pigeonitis, and everyone catches it and turns into pigeons for a while, apart from one person who's really jealous because everybody else, when they get better, has these round eyes like a bird and they don't have them. And it's almost as though everyone has turned into a flock and they coo at this person who has never had this illness. I love it. Let me find you a couple of lines. Mr. Sawaki's beard, for example, started growing at a startling rate. Though he shaved every morning, by evening it would be a bush of at least 20 centimetres. Miss Ashimura's feet, on the other hand, developed puddles, not water blisters, but real puddles, said to have tadpoles merrily swimming around in them. And then by the end of that story, the tadpoles grow into frogs and then they hop away. I loved that a lot. I haven't actually read any of her novels, and now I would like to. So let's look at the blurbs of them together and I can decide which one I would like to pick up. Okay, so she's written Record of a Night Too Brief, The Book of Tokyo, Manazuru, that doesn't appear to be available, The 10 Loves of Nishino, The Nakano Thrift Shop, and Strange Weather in Tokyo. Strange Weather in Tokyo is the one that everybody seems to talk about. Let's look at that blurb first. So this one is about a woman called Tiko in her late 30s living alone when she meets one of her high school teachers, Sensei, who is at least 30 years her senior. They share food and sake, budding relationship, and it hesitantly turns into love. It says it's funny and moving. Okay, so that's that one. The Nakano Thrift Shop. Among the jumble of paperweights, plates, typewriters, and general bric-a-brac in Mr. Nakano's thrift store, there are treasures to be found. Each piece carries its own story of love and loss, or so it seems to Hitomi when she takes a job there working behind the till. The 10 Loves of Nishino. I love that cover. Oh, this sounds really fun. So this is about 10 women who have succumbed, even if only for an hour, to a seductive, imprudent, and furtively feline man who drifted naturally into their lives. And this is them each telling their story. Like a modern Decameron, this humorous, sensual, and touching novel embraces portraits of the human comedy in 10 voices, driven by desires that are at once unique and common. The women in this book are modern, familiar to us, and yet still mysterious. I like that. Oh, The Book of Tokyo is an anthology. So this one is not just by her. It also has other Japanese writers, including Banana Yoshimoto, who I love. Well, maybe I will get that one because it's at least 2 authors who I love. So this is just a book of stories set in Tokyo. It says a shapeshifter arrives at Tokyo Harbour in human form, set to embark on an unstoppable rampage through the city's train network. A young woman is accompanied home one night by a reclusive student and finds herself lured into a flat full of eerie Egyptian artifacts. A man suspects his young wife's obsession with picnicking every weekend in the city's parks hides a darker motive. Okay, so I'm definitely going to buy that one. And maybe The 10 Loves of Nishino. I will message Katie at Booksellers Inc. If you're looking to buy books from an independent bookshop that can be posted to you, she's wonderful. You just message her on Twitter and say, hello, Katie, I would like these things. And she says, sure, this is how much they are. And then you send her the money. And that's it. She has been a saviour during this time that we live in, and also other times as well. Okay, I'm going to message her. And then I'm really hungry, so let's go finish making these bread buns, and then I'll come back to you afterwards. Oh, and I'm going to make some homemade hummus to go inside, along with, I think, obviously I'm not going to make these other things. I have bought them cucumber. I didn't make the cucumber. Cheese and jalapenos. That is my sandwich filling of choice. What do you like in your sandwich? Riveting questions here with Jen. In the last bit, I mentioned that there was a period where I wrote quite a bit of flash fiction. I think it was about 10 years ago. So I had a rummage in a box where I keep all of the literary journals where I had work published, and I unearthed this, which is the National Flash Fiction Day Anthology. It's from 2012, so it's from 8 years ago, and it's called Jawbreakers, and I have the title story in here. And there are lots of so many cool people in here. So my story is next to a story by Alice Smith, which is the shortest microfiction ever. Is it Hemingway who did it? Telling a story in 6 words, you know, baby shoes for sale, never worn. Hers is 6 words, and it's called Quick. Once upon a time, gentlemen, please. But it has this line break in it, so you can read it in lots of different ways. Like it's the beginning of the fairy tale. Once upon a time, gentlemen did please. Or once upon a time, gentlemen, please be quiet, because she's trying to tell a story. It also reads like she's telling people to queue up one at a time. Like one at a time, gentlemen, please. Why can you dissect 6 words in so many different ways? Because it's Alice Smith, that's why. So my story is right next to hers, and yeah, it looks like this. It's called Jawbreakers. I thought I would read it because let's have a trip down memory lane. Let's see what I was writing 8 years ago. And it's in Geordie. Okay, for those of you who don't know, I am from Sunderland, so really I guess I should say it's in Mackem, but I think I used to have more of a Geordie accent than a Mackem accent. Okay, so it's called Jawbreakers, obviously really short because it's flash fiction. Jawbreakers as in gobstoppers. I only used to steal from the collection balls so me and Tony could buy gobstoppers at the grass market. And anyway, it wasn't really stealing. Me mam put a quid in, and the stoppers were off that. Sometimes, Dad says, people at church can be greedy as out, so I don't feel too bad. We were greedy and all. Would buy the big kind, the ones that would near choke you if you didn't suck 'em right. Would skip maths class and sneak out over the cliff tops, suck 'em as the wind blew in our faces, throwing stones at the seagulls. When the bell rang, would shove the stoppers back in their paper bags, all sticky in our pockets. If they got ruined, would lob them at the kids on the bus home. They're like the world, innit? Tony said, spit dripping off her chin, her cheeks filled out like rock-hard balloons. Aye, I said, nodding, balancing the whole world on me tongue. Okay, so it is about 2:30, so I'm going to stop this video now because it's been 24 hours, but let me tell you what books I have started reading. This is a short story collection I'm also reading for Women in Translation Month. It's called The Sea, Cloak and Other Stories by Nayrouz, Qarmout, and this is translated from the Arabic by Perrine Richards. I've only read the first story, so I'm going to read more and see how I feel. But with the first story, I did feel like I was reading work in translation. It's hard to articulate that feeling, but when you sense that there is a gap or that the translation isn't as smooth as it could possibly be, or it might be that the writing in its original language isn't as smooth as it could possibly be. So I found it a little bit, what's the word? It felt a bit like stepping stones. It felt as if there were gaps in it. It also was a little bit too romantic for me, but that last one is a very personal taste. So I'm not sure how I feel about this book yet, but I will read the rest of the stories and hopefully will fall in love with them. I've also started reading Weather by Jenny Offill, and I'm not sure about this one either. This is currently shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I'm reading all of the shortlisted books. This is the third one, so I still have 3 more to go. And this is a very disjointed novel where a librarian is answering questions that have been sent in, and she's thinking about climate change. I love the premise of that. Some of it is really funny, not the bits to do with climate change, obviously, but she's talking about her son. A few days later, I yelled at him for losing his new lunchbox, and he turned to me and said, "Are you sure you're my mother? Sometimes you don't seem like a good enough person." He was just a kid, so I let it go, and now, years later, I probably only think of it, I don't know, once or twice a day. That really made me laugh. So I'm not sure how I feel about Weather yet. There are bits that really tickle me, and then there are some bits where I'm not really sure if the style is working for me, and I really love experimental, disjointed fiction, so I don't know, we'll see. I will continue reading both of these. I will finish them and I will speak about them properly once I have done so. So those were the 5 books that I read in the last 24 hours. I will list them in the description box down below. I will also link the recipe for the bread buns and for the chickpeas, for the hummus, if the mood takes you and you want to make some hummus. Do check out the link to Skillshare, which is right at the top of the description box. Head on over there and check out their fantastic classes. As I said, the first 1,000 people to click on that get 2 months of Skillshare free. Thank you very much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. I hope you guys are doing okay, and I will speak to you very soon. Sending all my love. Bye.